We follow, and now I'll give the floor to Franklin DEHOUSSE. I'm not going to comment on his curriculum vitae, because I think he has been working with in the history of European Union in many positions, but I would add only one information that can be useful is that, moreover of politics and justice, he has been the co-author of 6 comic strips. Yes. This means that you are for the Europe of culture. So, you have the floor.
Thank you, Enrique. Yes, comic strips, and I must tell you, visiting regularly the European Parliament was a huge source in that activity too. So, I came here in the 80s, you know, and as a young European advisor, and saw the Spinelli debates on the European Constitution. We didn't get it. And then I came in the 90s with Fernand Herman. He made another constitution for the European Parliament. We did not get it. And then I came with Jean-Luc Dehaene in the 2 conventions, and we had the European constitutions, and it was not adopted. So it teaches you something about European affairs. I visited the other institutions too, and I'm always happy to be here because I have developed a huge love of this institution. And it's an ideal. But on the other side, I'm always stricken by 2 facts. First, decade after decade, I wonder, what are the people in the street understanding in such a debate? I fail to see that. Second, this has become the typical parliament debate. Then you have an agenda, which is absolutely not respected due to some members' constraints. After this, you have a debate between old and present members of parliament, who sometimes listen to each other, but not always. And then the external guests are meant to decorate, and we'll never hear them. And we'll have some members of parliament saying, we need to have a dialogue. But this dialogue, in fact, due to all these objective conditions, never takes place. So, I'm interested in the reaction of the young visitors, and so I have an email, franklin.dehousse@gmail.com. If you dare send your observations in this debate, I would be most interested. And I'm going to try to curtail my intervention because we are very late and I want to listen to Paul. So, this historical perspective in all institutions brings some paradox. We are here to defend democracy, so obviously it is threatened. And this is a little bit curious. When we were in the parliament decades earlier, the union was doing less and the parliament was not powerful. Now the union does much more and the parliament is much more powerful. And before the union was popular, and now it is completely unpopular. What has happened? This should concentrate our attention. Then we can see certainly that this is the problem of democracy is something that is not a European Union problem. This is also, it has been mentioned, a problem in the member states and even in other Western democracies. We have seen someone elected as president in the United States while he violated a lot of principles. Japan seems a bloc democracy since the end of the 80s. And we have problems in more or less all our member states. Weak governments, unstable majorities, members of parliaments who are criticized, and judges who are sometimes attacked, especially in the UK, in a quite vitriolic way. So, obviously, we have a problem with democracy and the rule of law. So, how could this happen? It seems to have a lot to do with the general feeling of insecurity in the population. It's economic insecurity brought by digitalization, brought by globalization, social insecurity, the problems of austerity due to the financial crisis, cultural insecurity, you have the waves of migrants, the population is changing very quickly. So you have also terrorism, you have sometimes in some member states, well, autocratic governments who seem to be a little bit more threatening on our borders. So all this creates a very bad climate. and this seems to provoke dangerous reactions. I was invited to comment also about what the EU courts could do about this. I'm not going to tell you because I need to find some time, but you can read it very easily on the Internet. The advantage of Internet is that you can cut your speeches and provide the details to the interested readers. So you can read, and there are some things to be said about the EU Code. But what I'm concerned about is what the whole institutional of the EU could do. Because, of course, we have crises everywhere in the democracies, but there is a special problem in the EU, probably because it is a little bit bigger and it is a little bit further. So, and it is a little bit more complex. Recently, I was commenting an article by Margaret Macmillan in the Financial Times. She is a great historian. I respect her tremendously. But she wrote this: respect for the rule of law will overcome any chance of a return to the Weimar area, to the Weimar Republic's climate. And on this point, I beg to differ, because our destabilized societies are generally not known for their love of the rule of law. And I was absolutely saddened and stricken to give you one single example about what is the level of democracy, rule of law, and respect to debate, because after the assassination of Joe Cox in the UK, just before the Brexit referendum, Twitter had to delete some 25,000 tweets. Because they were criticizing Joe Cox in various ways, or sometimes praising the killer, a hero, a patriot. These are things floating in Twitter, and this gives you a scale of the problem we are. We are in a very sick society. Let's imagine what this could be if we had, in the UK, the economic conditions of the Weimar Republic, meaning 25% reduction of revenue and 25% unemployment. What would we see on Twitter then? So, I believe that at the EU level, if we want, this is what I tried to do in the other institutions, we need to try to fight back, to find some legitimacy, because we are criticized. Well, then the political scientists tell you that if you want legitimacy, there is input legitimacy, output legitimacy. To simplify, you need a good process of decision and you need good results. So, could we do something about a better process? I have to tell you, this is my humble feeling. Because the EU system has become absolutely cabalistic. This is some kind of bureaucratic and legal nightmare, and even specialized professors of EU law fight to try to explain this to the young generations of students. And they marvel about mixed agreements, shared competencies, various forms of subsidiarity, various forms of procedure, a very divided system of banking supervision, regulators which do not have the powers of regulators, and you could add and pile on some kind of sea of acronym in perpetual renewal. How can... Yes, you can certainly find other examples. So I must make a confession. The European Union has become a gigantic carbon copy of Belgium. In Belgium, you need more or less a PhD to call the fireman, refurbish your apartments, or pay your taxes. And Europe is more or less the same now. This is marvelous. That's why it is the paradise for the lawyers. So, and there is a fatality. Each time there is a problem, someone proposes to complexify the system. You see Brexit. Then you have very good thinkers from Bruegel who say, we are going to create a new council gathering all kinds of external member states who are going to shape the decision of the Union before the Union is going to take its decisions. And after this you have the Delors Center. They say we have to strengthen the Eurozone. We are going to create a new parliamentary assembly, which is not the European Parliament, which is not the COSAC, which will be a mixed with selective criteria, etc. How will this function? What will citizens understand? Well, I fail to see. And then we have this Brexit. Well, there's always something fantastic in the European Union. Now, we have these Brexit negotiations. Someone mentioned it very rightly before. We have 28 commissioners. Why can't we select one commissioner to deal with Brexit? Why do we need to find someone else who will be in a special capacity and who will make this complex process more complex? So, this is the state of our system. Furthermore, we have an institutional that has become obese. Yes, we have too many commissioners. Yes, we have maybe too many members of parliament. Yes, we have too many auditors. Yes, we have too many judges, I must tell you. So this is, by the way, another Belgian syndrome, the ever-expanding bureaucracy. In Belgium, each time we have a problem, we create a new layer, we declare the problem solved, and we get to the next problem. And all this, and I come to the point, feeds the anti-Europe movement. I tell you a personal example. I came back here as a judge in a committee because we were asked by the committee to comment the proposal to double the General Court. Double a court. So some of my former colleagues and I, we come to the committee, we explain this would be an ineffective, costly and disproportionate reform. We provide a lot of explanations and statistics. And all this could be easily verified if anybody cared. But nobody seems to care. There is no impact assessment, no broad consultation, no verification of the state of the workflow, no sunset clause. Just in case. No. All big pro-Europe groups approved the doubling. And recently I read in the press that some judges complain now that they have not enough work. So, to conclude, if we want to defend our democracy, having a good legal system is certainly positive. But to reconnect with the public, our institutions have to be more understandable, more transparent, and dare I add, more modest. In that regard, for example, deciding in a local institution to have many official limousines with drivers in special uniform is probably not the best idea, I must say. So we have a last problem, which is a problem of return for some categories of the population, and this has been discussed extensively in the Brexit and the American election context. So there are categories from the population where the EU provides little concrete advantages. To be fair, some advantages are very clear for people who move or participate to the economic life. But on the contrary, a white man of 57 who does not move, who lost his job due to digitalization, who has health problems, who has a little pension, who feels migrants threaten to destabilize his fragile universe, this man is not going to see many benefits in the European Union. Even after 1,000 discussions like this. As a matter of fact, he is even the prototype of the voter for Brexit or for Trump, or for a next election much near you. So, recently, for example, I noticed that the Parliament proposed to offer free rail passes. We can discuss about this. The Commission proposed to offer universal Internet connection. I believe this is, we can discuss about the modalities, but this is the good line of strategy. As Jacques Delors often emphasized, one does not fall in love with a single market. And the same could be said about a single currency, especially when it is imperfectly designed and managed. If we want to reconnect the public with the European democracy, I suspect we need to find concrete and simple advantages that will benefit everybody. Underline 3 times everybody. Not only the academics who have the privilege of coming speaking here. So, I suspect, nonetheless, there is still hope, and this is the advantage of having begun so far in time. Why? When I read the magnificent book of Tony Judd, Post-War, He described this continent as utterly destroyed, not only materially, but also spiritually. They were leaders. They found new ideas and new energies, and they created something completely innovative. And this was the communities. 35 years later, in 1980, this continent was completely paralyzed. They even invented a word, eurosclerosis. Well, other leaders came with new ideas and new energies, and we got another good period. And now, guess what? We are 35 years later. And of course, we can say that the period is rather dark and we can feel depressed. But nonetheless, I feel that if we find the right leaders, perhaps we'll find also the new ideas and the new energies, and we'll do better again. But to do this, we must never forget the legal system. This is nice, but first we have to deal with the functioning of our institutions. So my conclusion will be simple. Yes, we can improve the system, but first I'll take the words of Mahatma Gandhi in another context. If you want to protect democracy, first be yourself the change you want to see in the world. Thank you very much.